Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Awesome, awesome. Are you ready for an exciting workshop? Awesome, awesome. We're really excited to be hosting this today. First off, my name is Marty Gabauer. I'll be your MC for today. I'm the Executive Director of the Weekend Center for Professional Excellence, which is our career center here at Elmhurst College. And as I mentioned, we are excited to have this because you'll see when you walk out of here, this is an interactive and a very engaging workshop style that Jim, our speaker, will put on today, called Creating Brands That Stand. And it's something that I think everybody will be able to implement in one way, shape, or form, either for their organization or the company that they work with, or even looking at it from a career perspective for your own personal brand, because what Jim will be talking about from an organizational perspective can equally be applied to yourselves and however you might be marketing your own personal brand. So, in terms of the agenda for today's program, Jim will be presenting, and then the presentation will be followed by a networking lunch that will happen. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get together. But the purpose of doing the lunch afterwards is really for everybody to sit together, network with their colleagues, and really talk through what it was that they feel like they learned at today's session. Before we start our program, what I wanted to also do is just take care of a couple of housekeeping announcements. If you haven't noticed already, the washrooms are located towards the back, and we'll be having a break about halfway through Jim's program. And then if you can also please make sure to turn off your cell phones or turn them down so they're not ringing throughout the program, that would be wonderful as well. Before I introduce Jim, what I'd like to do is ask our president, Dr. Troy Van Aken, to come up and make a few opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Marty, and I'm so glad that Elmhurst College is located in Elmhurst. Over the last few weeks, there have been just many opportunities for the city to provide some assistance to us, and in every turn they've been there. The county's been there, and we just really feel fortunate to be in this location. And I think this event is another great example of the close relationship that the college has with the city of Elmhurst and the institutions and the local business community. And I think that's one of the things that draws students to the college is the amazing community that we're part of. So many of our students are proud to call Elmhurst their second home. And when they say that, they're not just talking about the campus, they're talking about the community as well. So I'd like to thank our trustees, Frank Cerrone, Russ Wiegand, for introducing us to today's presenter, Jim Paglia, the City of Elmhurst and Elmhurst College Commission, the Economic Development Corporation, the Chamber of Commerce and Industry for co-sponsoring this event. And then I also like to thank Pan American Bank and Trust. And I see Patrick from Pan American Bank. Raise your hand, Patrick. He's one of their lenders there. So if you need a loan, you might want to look at Pan American Bank to be able to help you. But they generously sponsored this event, and thank you, Patrick and Frank, for doing that. Now, today's topic's especially relevant to us at the college because we're not going to be a college in a few months. We're going to be renaming ourselves and rebranding ourselves as Elmhurst University, and there's a lot of discussions that go on about how we do that because we want to hang on to the best, but we want to be forward-looking as well, and so I think this is very relevant. And we're rebranding in a way that captures what we've become after nearly 150 years of educating students and preparing them for the world that awaits them after graduation. But at the same time, we don't want this name change to do something to our core identity and the values and the mission that we have. And so in some ways, Jim, we're going to be creating our own brand that will stand for the next 150 years, maybe even beyond that. So thanks everybody for being here today. And if you need anything, just let us know. We want to be as good a host as possible.
So thank you, Dr. Van Aken. Our presenter, Jim Paglia, is president and CEO of Brands That Stand, a nationally recognized brand strategy consulting firm that has worked with hundreds of clients, including Fortune 100 companies, national non-for-profits, government entities, universities, entrepreneurs, and small businesses. Jim has had a lengthy career in advertising, public relations, and integrated marketing, managing the accounts of some of the world's most recognized brands. He has founded a successful ad agency and subsequently his current consulting firm. He served as a president and/or chairman of more than 25 not-for-profits over the past 20 years, including serving as chairman of the board for Chicago's 1994 World Cup of Soccer, which was hosted here, which was really cool for any of those that may have been at that event. Awesome job on that. All the while being a husband and proud father of now 2 adult children. Clearly, the man is nothing if not energetic. We are truly excited to have Jim share his knowledge and wisdom with us today. Without further ado, Jim Paglia.
Thanks, Marty. So, what's your opinion of me so far? What do you think? Okay, here's the point. Most of what we know about branding is really driven by the way our brains operate. And the way our brains operate is very simple. We form opinions about the things we see in the first 3 seconds that we are exposed to them. So you saw me for 3 seconds, and you had an opportunity to form an opinion. I would like all of you to take out a piece of paper, grab a pen, and I want you to write a word or a small phrase that describes your opinion of me at this moment. Go ahead and write it down. Terrific. Okay, and I want you to hold on to that. We're going to come back to that at some point. I have some friends here and a son. That's that adult son that was mentioned earlier, Tate. They're going to walk around and they're going to give you evaluation forms, which we'd like you to fill out. They're very, very brief. They will collect those at the end of the presentation. They'll be standing in the back, and they would like to collect those. So if you would, take a moment and fill those out. Those will be helpful to us when this is over. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like everyone to, after you get your, well, let's get those handed out, but what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to close your eyes. But I'm kind of doing 2 things at once here, giving you paper and asking you to close your eyes. So let's do one at a time. We'll get those out there. And I guess you can see from the slide, one of the key issues is purpose-driven. And where does it start? It's always about your behaviors, and that's all that really matters. Branding is not about communication. Communications is just a manifestation of branding. You're not branding by communicating. Branding is how you behave and how people perceive that behavior. That's the point I want to make about being purpose-driven. If you don't express your purpose and all you're expressing is your opinion, you are not a brand. I'm going to show you some examples of that in a little bit. So I think everybody's got an evaluation form, and I'd like you to help me with a little exercise. I'd like you all to close your eyes and lift your right arm over your head, and I want you to point to what you think is north. Now I'd like you to open your eyes and look where everybody's pointing. So you might be interested in knowing, because I checked, north is right here, right over the top of that flag. So my point in saying that to you is that most of you were relatively close, but not necessarily right there. So one of the issues I wanted to emphasize with you is that you must be persuasive. You can't just communicate. And you won't know how to do that if you don't know the direction in which you are pointed. We all think we know where we're going, but we just proved it. Some of us thought north was that way, but we all thought we knew where we were going. So we're going to play another game, and I'm going to ask people in the audience to yell out some responses for me. Who wants to play? Raise your hand. First person who raises their hand. Okay. Sure. Let's do that. I know Richie, so we can start. Richie, what I'd like you to do as fast as you can, and everybody's going to follow the same directions. I want you to name toothpaste until I tell you to stop. When I say stop, you can just stop, but I want you to remember what you said. Toothpaste as fast as you can.
Crest, Colgate.
Stop. Crest, Colgate, stop. Toothpaste as fast as you can. Stop. Somebody else raise your hand. Anybody, raise your hand. I'm going to change course on you. Somebody, there you go. I want you to name luxury automobiles as fast as you can until I tell you to stop.
Okay, Audi, Mercedes-Benz, Saab.
Stop. Automobiles as fast as you can. Luxury automobiles. Yep, go ahead.
BMW.
Stop. I'm going to try one more. Somebody over on this side that wants to play, raise your hand. Come on, somebody wants to play. We're going to choose a new category. Somebody raise your hand, or I'll just point. There we go. All the way in the back, you raised your hand. Will you name, yes, breakfast cereals as fast as you can? Stop. On this side, breakfast cereals. Anybody, as fast as you can. Yes, go ahead. Stop. Okay, what did we just do? We played what is known as the game. Whenever you said hesitated, or looked away, I stopped you. And the reason I did that is because our brains are wired to remember things in groups of 3 or fewer. So most of you could name one thing or 2 things, and then you went and in one case, you said one thing, and then you said What was the one thing you said again? Was it Frosted Flakes? Okay. Do you eat a lot of cereal? There you go. So it was my job as a brand person to interpret that she wasn't going to go any further. When she said after the first one, I knew she wasn't a cereal person. Do you see how that works? That's how our brains are wired. We remember things in groups of 3 or fewer. So that's called your mental shelf. And you want to be sure that you are on someone's mental shelf. And you want to be number 1 on their shelf. Or you want to be on a shelf by yourself. And that's even better. You get that? It's a very hard thing to control, but if you were to try to rattle off any other category, you will not be successful when you get to 4, 5, and 6. Here's what happens quite often. I'll say automobiles, and people will say to me, Lexus, Mercedes, Ferrari. Boom, I caught them. Those are not luxury cars. Lexus and Mercedes may be luxury cars. A Ferrari is known as an exotic. You know how many Mercedes you could buy for the same money as one Ferrari? So what you did was you mentally shifted shelves on me. And I have to be smart enough to realize that. And if I were a car dealer and you walked in and said, I'm looking for a luxury car, I'm interested in either a Mercedes or a Lexus or Ferrari, well, boy, would I have seen you coming. You see what I mean? Know the shelf that you belong on and try to establish a shelf of your own. Very critical piece. I love that game. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what a brand is. And you can read these. I'm not going to read them to you, but I just want you to see those emphasized words. It's really leaping to something, leaping to meaning. That's what a brand has to do, is what is the real meaning? Not what is the message, what is the meaning? You want to create a tribe. And I'll tell you, we can make this whole thing available to you, so you don't have to write it all down, but write the stuff that sticks. That's the other thing I wanted to share with you is, I'm not going to teach you how to do any of this today. It's not going to happen. This workshop, when I did it with Pan American Bank and Trust as an example, it goes on for a day, 2 days, sometimes 3 days for the entire workshop. All I'm giving you is a flavor of it. And what I want you to do is to recognize the compelling aspects that define a brand. I'm not going to be able to teach you how to do it today. But I think you're going to walk away with a different understanding, a different way of thinking about a brand. And that's what I was really hoping would happen. But being able to build a tribe is an important part of it. This is so critical. Your brand is just the space in somebody's mind. It doesn't exist. It's in their mind. So you want to help control how they view what you think of your brand. And most importantly, it's the experience. Again, it's not what I say, it's what you feel, what you get to experience. That's the key to it. This is a trademark of mine. It's called I See Me. And that's what you want every brand to convey. I see me. Not I see the company, I see the products, I see their messages, I see me. So a brand is always about them. It's never about us. Do you understand that? So let's go back to the video that Pan American Bank and Trust did. That was done internally by them. I think they did a very nice job with it, and what I like most about it is not necessarily the content, it's the direction. If you watched it again, you'd realize it's about their users. It's not so much about the bank. It's about the people who can use it. And so we are hoping that a business person will see that and say, I see me. That's what we seek in every brand, is get to a point where somebody can say, I see me. So I've been in soccer a very long time. I'm involved in the game on every level. I work internationally with a lot of the biggest clubs in the world. It's about a third of what I do is consult to professional soccer clubs around the world. And over again, I say to them, even among the youth, build an environment where the parents and the kids can say, I see me. Not, oh, we have a winning record. You're not going to win all the time. Stop trying to build a dynasty and build a church. That's the key to a brand. Do you know anybody that quits their church? And what happens in a church? When things go bad, what happens? People move closer to their faith, closer to their church. They don't move away from it. But in a lot of other organizations, when things start to go bad, they go and look for a replacement. You want your brand to feel like a place that is more faith-based and less commodity-based. Any of that making sense? I want to tell you a story. You see this mundane-looking building? It's called the National Museum of Health and Medicine. They're a client, part of the Department of Defense. How many of you have ever heard of this before? One person, two people, there you go. 3 people. Okay, so this museum was founded in 1863 by Abraham Lincoln. And the intent was to collect body parts on the battlefield and study them to improve military medicine. So they literally would go out and collect limbs and figure out how to minimize the damage that's done in battle. This museum has been around a long time. It used to be at Walter Reed. Walter Reed was put out of business. They closed it down, as they did a number of other facilities. These people called and said, we want to save our museum. The museum has 25 million artifacts and relics that they have collected going all the way back to the Civil War. They have the bullet that killed Abraham Lincoln. They have his bloody clothes. They have the spine of John Wilkes Booth. They have the brain of Albert Einstein. They have 25 million artifacts and relics, and it was all going to be disposed of, and the museum was going to be shut down. And they said, help give us a strategy. You have 3 weeks. And I said, let's start with I See Me. Instead of a museum that is really focused on what your collection is. They're known as the Museum of the Babies in the Bottles. I don't know if you've ever heard that expression, but they have a whole bunch of fetuses that are every size, and they call it the babies in the bottles. Did I lose you guys somewhere? Let's see what happens. Uh-oh. Tech to the rescue, they'll get it for us. So the Babies in the Bottle Museum, that's how they were known, and I find that offensive. That's just not what they were about. So I'm going to tell you the very first time I walked into the museum, not the first, one of the early times I walked in the museum, I walked in with that young man over there sitting there. He's 26 years old today. But I'll let you get in there. Okay. When we went to the museum that time, he was 10 years old. And we walked in, and he saw the babies in the bottles, and he was mesmerized. He said, "Whoa, that's so cool." And then he started asking me questions about medicine, something he'd never asked about before. And I thought, that's his perspective. That's how he sees himself. I went in from the perspective that I had a patriotic obligation to help that museum. I never served in the military, but it didn't mean I couldn't serve the military. And so I put a strategy together to save the museum. Not by myself, by the way, a bunch of people involved, too many people. But we were able to design one, and the museum was saved. We kept it all. We moved it to Silver Spring, Maryland. It's at Fort Detrick now, and it's part of the government and part of the military, so it has to be on a base. But the beauty is we built that little building that you see there, and we opened that museum a couple of years ago, and they almost immediately gave us a multi-million-dollar grant to build an even larger version of it across the street. So we now have an annex that's actually bigger than the original museum. And I'm really proud of that facility. And my logic was, when we were trying to explain it to the people at the Pentagon, remember I talked to you about purpose? Here's where purpose comes in. They were saying, why should we do this? There are so many other things we could do. All they're doing is studying military medicine. I said, well, yeah, they're the #1 authority in the world on traumatic brain injury. The #1 authority. The NFL goes to them to design their helmets because they know how to design military helmets. They invented body armor. They invented it at that museum. So they call it a museum, but it's 1,400 forensic scientists. They are hooked up to the battlefield by video, and they direct the surgeries that go on in the battlefield. And do you know what it means when somebody's lost half their skull and you want to save their life? These are the people who do it. And I thought, we got to save this. So we set out to do that, and we were able to do that. That's compelling to me, purposeful. And so when I was talking to the people at the Pentagon about why we needed to save it, they said, give us a good reason. And I pointed over to Arlington, and I said, you see all those markers, those headstones? If you don't believe that these people are important, then I want you to turn that into a parking lot. Because those people gave one time for their country. And I love that, I admire that, and I respect that. But these people did it twice. They died for their country, and they left their remains so others could be saved. That's purposefulness. And he turned to me and said, how much money do you need? Because he saw himself in that example. That's what I wanted to get across. You can read that for yourself. You all have mechanisms now. You can all get your messages out. Getting a message out is easy. Everybody does it. So it's not about messaging. It's about purpose. And I thought you might enjoy this. If you don't have a strategy, what are you doing? Random flailing. So this is a trademarked entity as well. It's what I refer to as brand arc. And this is one of the most important things that you will pick up from today. What is brand arc? It's being authentic, relevant, and consistent in your behaviors. If you aren't doing those three things, you don't have a brand. You must be truly authentic, truly relevant, and truly consistent. And I use this word a lot. You need to be disruptive in the marketplace, but not destructive. And there's a distinction there. You must be disruptive. You must find a way to say to whomever it is you want to communicate, we are not what you think we are. This is what we are. And it always must be disruptive. People want better, they want brighter, they want best. And that's hard to do because many things we do are commodities. How do you separate yourself from everybody else who does what you do? That's establishing a brand. And I'm going to show you a couple steps to make that happen. Before I do that, I wanted you to look at this list. And you can see for yourself, taxi companies were not put out by Uber. Uber just decided to have something better. You don't want to be a taxi driver 5 years from now. You might still be an Uber driver. When you look at some of these comparisons, Apple put the music industry on its ear. How many people used to go to a record store? I have a son who doesn't know what a record is because Apple figured it out. And what did Apple really figure out? They didn't figure out how to make a better MP3 player, because that's what they did. They didn't do that. Sony had those well before Apple did. What they determined was, I want people to see themselves having their music where they want it, when they want it, how they want it. That's what Apple figured out. Give them their music when, where, and how they want it. So you can buy individual cuts. You don't have to buy a whole album. That's the key to Apple, is they didn't worry about the machine, they worried about the user experience. And they built an industry around it. And they hurt another industry doing it. And so all of these industries that looked like they were hurt by something actually were beaten to the punch because somebody figured out a better way to do it. How many of you are Amazon users? Okay. How many of you were Amazon users 10 years ago? How many of you think you'll be Amazon users 10 years from now? You're wrong, because something will do it better. Amazon will fade. Now, unless you're my age, then of course you'll still be using Amazon because we don't change. We just keep doing what we've always done. You don't want to be that person. We're going to do another little exercise, and I need some volunteers. This is my absolute favorite. You're going to love this. Can I have 6 or maybe 8 volunteers? Anybody? Come on up. Sure, there you go. Just come on up. You're going to do a little coloring exercise for us. Come on. Come on, I need some more. Keep coming. Come on. Would you just go over to that table and help yourself to any color crayons and construction paper that you like? And just stay there, okay? So let me tell you what they're going to do. This is an exercise I typically do with the whole room, but it would just take us too long. So we're going to show it to you just as an example. So they have their crayons and their construction paper. They get to choose the crayons and the colors that they want, and they're going to do some drawings for us. And I want you to keep in mind, folks, you're going to share your drawings with the audience. Okay? So it's not important that you be a great artist. It's just important that you follow the rules. So are you ready? Some of you can see them, but the rules are, I want you to just draw what I ask you to draw using symbols, nothing but symbols. No words, no letters, no numbers, no people, no body parts, no stick figures. Okay? Did I leave any of them out? I was trying to do it from memory. Animals, no animals. Okay? So do you get it? No people, no body parts, no animals, no stick figures, no words, letters, or numbers. So I'm going to ask you to draw something. Follow those rules. You ready? Can you draw for us how you see yourself? Now, let's put it this way. Let's see how your number one loved one views you. Draw your favorite, the person that loves you the most, draw how they see you using only symbols. And follow those rules. How does the person that loves you the most see you? Go ahead and draw. No people, no body parts, no stick figures, no animals, no words, letters, or numbers. How do they see you? And don't look at other people's. Just look at yours. How you doing? You getting there? If you're done, just raise your hand so we'll know everybody's ready. Perfect. Okay. And if you're not done, too bad. All right. So we're going to do 2 more drawings. You ready? You just drew how your loved one sees you, right? Now I'd like you to draw how you view yourself differently from what you just drew. Your loved one sees you one way, you see yourself another way. Go ahead and draw what you look like today. In your own world, how do you view yourself? Okay? Now I would like you to draw how you think this audience will react to your drawings. Using only symbols. No body parts, no stick figures, no people, no animals, no words, no numbers or letters. This is an exercise that I do it with every client. This is how I start almost every engagement, including when we did it at the Pentagon. So we have a bunch of generals sitting around doing coloring. Now, why do we do that? What are we learning from this? You're observing. What are you learning? Anybody? Introspection, right? I want you to also acknowledge, go ahead.
Break down bias.
That's exactly it. You break down the bias and the preconceptions. I could have brought a group of 4-year-olds up here and asked them to do the same thing, and they would have been able to respond. Probably not as artistically as this group.
I don't know about that.
But I will tell you this much. I promise you, they would have followed directions a lot better than these people did. Watch what happens. If I name something you drew, and I haven't seen any of your drawings yet, if I name something you drew, just raise your hand. Okay? Did anybody, I'm going to start with the easy one. Who drew a heart? Anybody? Boom. Well, keep your hands up. Look, did I not say no body parts? Is that not a heart?
The biological heart does not look like that.
Did you draw a heart? Yeah. See how it works? How many of you drew a symbol that represents energy? A light bulb? Raise your hand. Or any form of energy. Oh, there you go. See what I mean? Did any of you draw anything that relates to a circle and connection? Okay, there we go. I can do this all day. And we will get to virtually everything they drew. What's the point I'm making? We have a tendency when we are trying to communicate to use the most simplistic examples. And in many cases, the examples that we use are cliches. They're not distinctive. Remember, I asked you the person who loves you the most. Wouldn't that be compelling? So who wants to show us their drawing? Come on. First one, show it to the audience. Can you all see that? No. Why? It's too small. They were told in advance, we're going to show it to the audience. They weren't told they could only use one piece of paper. They weren't told they had to put all 3 on one side. But they did what? They assumed. They jumped ahead and made assumptions about what they were expected to communicate. Don't make those assumptions in your brand. Recognize that it must always be from the audience's perspective. It's not about what I have to show you. It's about what it is you choose to see. I can't see it. Get it? All right, so I'm now going to pick on you a little bit more. Okay, so let's hold it up again and let's see what it was. And you can explain. how your loved one sees you as?
A heart, love,
Love. Okay. And how do you see yourself?
a flower growing
And how will the audience see you?
with a smile.
Right? Beautiful. Okay. Who wants to do theirs next? Oh, yeah, I can see the sun and the heart. Let's do that. That's it. Good luck trying to see this. She picked the colors.
The first one was my loved ones see me as light. So I drew a sun. I see myself with love, and I couldn't think of anything about how you would see me.
How they would see you, right. But I want to make a distinction here. Can we have those two drawings side by side, please, and show those to the audience? This is a function of communication again, and this is how the brain works. This is called portrait. This is called landscape. This tells me that she reached inside and she was giving you the picture as she sees it. This tells me that she was externalizing it and showing it to you in a diagram. I don't invent that. That's the way our culture works. So I want to show you something else. Hers goes top to bottom, so there's a progression, but they're in the middle of the page, which means that she hasn't really defined them fully. It means that she's given herself room to expand. That's how she drew it. In your case, you started a progression, but you started going downhill. There's a reason for that as well, because you started to lose your train of thought, right? They're communicating. That's what they're doing. I wanted you to see that. Anybody else want to show us theirs? Sure, come on up, let's see what we got. Can anybody see that? So why'd you choose those colors?
Blue is my favorite color. And red, I love red too.
Okay, so she is the typical brand manager. I'm going to do what I like. Go ahead, what did you draw?
So I drew a heart, and then like his world revolves around his love for me.
There you go.
But I'm talking about my dog. So just to make it clear, and then I'm a big ray of sunshine, and then the audience will see that with a smile.
Okay, so I want to stay with this one as well. She used both sides, used bigger drawings because people were going to see them. And she put this one at the top of the page. What does that say? Does anybody else have a drawing where they're, can I just see them real fast? Just flash them and let me see what you've got. Okay, nobody did what I was going to look for, but yours is closest. Can I see yours, please? Yes. Thank you. Okay, so do you see how she kind of started in the middle of the page and then she ended up over here? Okay, in our culture, the fact that she went to this border says she's done. There's nowhere else for her to go. We work left to right in our culture. So if she had moved over here, started on this side, then I would have recognized it, unless you come from a different culture. Because if you came from another part of the world, you would have started on this side of the page. It's my job to recognize that. It's not to be judgmental, it's to say you may be from a different culture. I can't assume anything. Thank you. All right, so thank you all. I'm not going to bother to embarrass anybody, but you're all, you want to show yours? Do you really want to show yours?
I just have a really weird, different drawing than
Oh, well, we want to see weird.
Bob.
Go ahead.
Okay. Here's my drawing. It's really big. Okay, darn it. Here.
It's like the swirl going out. Actually, that's all she drew.
And isn't a smile of people or environment?
It is, but I wasn't going to get technical. Here's the, as she's showing it around, you all get to see it. I want to know what there is about it that makes it stand out, because she really does want us to know that. And I want to explain something that's, I think, is going to shed a little light on this entire exercise. So fire away. What did you do?
Oh,
Tell us why you drew it.
it's more that I drew something different
Okay.
than
Why did you choose to do something different?
I drew just like a big ball of like energy and light and warmth and sunshine. And then when you said myself, then I kind of drew the circle like inside, and then outside, then I just kind of continued with more rays and stuff. And so I realized that I just thought very differently, and I thought that's worth noting.
That's a brand. Think differently. Did she not just give you a compelling brand story? She thinks differently. She told you why she did what she did. It's the number one issue in a brand. People don't care what you do. They don't care how you do it. They care what? Why? I didn't invent that. There are a lot of other consultants who use that terminology all the time. But you just explained why you did it, and that's what made it special. Thank you all. I appreciate your cooperation. Now, I'm going to give you another wrinkle to this thing. I do this everywhere I go, and I was doing it with Mercedes. They have 3 regional offices in the country. They have 3 separate presidents who run those. And I was out on the West Coast, and I said to somebody, can you do these drawings? And they did them. And the woman that did it, her name's Jane, she did it, but she drew a crown. And then she folded the paper. And that's all she drew. And so I said to her, explain your drawing. And she goes, well, I'm access to the king, so I'm the queen. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And everybody laughed because in that office, they call her Queenie. And everybody thought that was hilarious. And I said, that's pretty good. I said, but why did you fold the paper and there's nothing beneath it? She goes, because that's how I'm viewed here. Outside of access to the king, I have no purpose here. Nobody really cares. And she started to cry. And then she turned to her boss and said, you want to tell him? And he said, she resigned. She's leaving tomorrow. And then I became the villain because I exposed that in a drawing 10 minutes into the conversation. But she drew it. So my point is, you can't disguise these things. The last example I'll give you is actually Elmhurst. I did some work with the Elmhurst Symphony many years ago. And they asked me to do a 3-day board retreat. And we started with this exercise. And the music director was late. We started without him. And we started doing the drawings. And when he came in, we told him what we were doing, and he started to do his drawings. And what do you think he drew? How are you seen? He drew a $sign. And how do you see yourself? He drew a treble clef. So one has to do with revenue, one has to do with artistry. But here's the secret. He drew it, and he put them both up in this corner, small and in this corner. And so I took a leap of faith, and I said to him, Stephen, when are you leaving? And he turned to the president, and he said, do you want to tell them? He had resigned. And he said, how did you know that? I said, because you drew them where you had nowhere else to go. And he goes, yeah, I'm leaving. And I said, okay, then you don't need to stay for the rest of the meeting, because we can't build the next 5 years around a guy who's not going to be here. The drawings are very compelling, very revealing. And my point to you is that you control it. You saw these people came up here, they got to pick. Now here's the last piece of this exercise that I want everybody to appreciate. How many of the people that were in the drawings, by raising your hands, how many of you drew something that I asked you not to draw? We revealed that you drew a face or you drew a heart. Most of you, right? Congratulations. Congratulations. You broke a rule. Here's the number one rule of communicating. Never, ever exclude the people element. I don't care what instructions you're given, never leave people out. And do you see that despite having mentioned it, putting it up there and saying it to them 3 separate times, they broke the rule. And they broke the rule because it's intrinsic. I can't communicate without acknowledging the people equation. However, people try to do it all the time, and they do it by telling me how great their products are, how great their services are, blah, blah, blah. It always has to relate to who? To them, not to us. Okay? See if I can do this without making a lot of noise. Come on. How many times have you seen this? I know I'm wasting half my money, I just don't know which half. I hear and see that all the time. So I've got another exercise, but I'm not going to actually let you do it because it's really complex and it would take a lot of time. But this is how we solve a lot of problems. We use what is called a forced paired comparison matrix. How many of you are familiar with this tool? Have ever seen one before? Good. Some of you. So the object is really very simple. In that column on the left, you're going to list criteria, and then you're going to repeat that criteria across the top. And then you're going to compare those two elements. So I'll give you another view of it here. So you see item A, you put that where that arrow is, and then you repeat it up above. And you just put those values in there. So let's talk about values for a second. I am trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. What am I? A Boy Scout. Has anybody ever said to you, I'm not reverent? Has anybody ever said to you, I'm not loyal? Has anybody ever said to you, I'm not trustworthy? Don't use moral terms to describe your business. Never say to people, our core value is integrity. Really? Did you ever meet anybody that said, we don't believe in integrity? It's not important to us? Skip the Boy Scout oath. Don't use terms like that. Don't talk to people about those types of moral values. Focus on work ethics. True, meaningful work ethics. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. But we use this exercise a lot. And it's why I'm not doing it today with you, because it takes the better part of a day to complete, particularly when you have a larger group. We did this at Pan American Bank and Trust, and Frank, I don't know if you remember it, but we probably spent the better part of a half day or more on this. And we had 10 people in the room, I think. So everybody starts out by inventing what they think the core value really is, and nobody gives you any guidance. You get to put what you want on there. And then you do this self-evaluation where you compare them. So you say, I'm going to compare A to B. You can't compare A to A, and that's why there's a black box there. You can't compare A to A, so you move over and you say, now I'm going to compare A to B. And if A is more important than B, you put a 1 in that box. If B is more important, you put the 0 in the box. And you always work from the left-hand side across. So I will say, let's talk about them as we'll call them fruit. All right, so A is an apple. Is an apple more important than a banana? If the answer is yes, I put a 1 in that first box. And if the answer is no, I put a 0. And then I say to myself, is an apple more important than a cherry? If the answer is yes, I put a 1. But in this case, I put a 0 because an apple is more important than a cherry. Everybody knows that, right? So then I work my way all the way across all those categories, and then I drop down to the next line. And now I ask myself, is a banana more important than an apple? And the answer is no. So I put a 0 in there. And you work your way all the way across again. So you're comparing everything to everything else, and you must always answer yes or no, more important or not. And you always work from the left. That's called the power line. And when you're done, you're going to have a very, very clear set of values. Now, they may not be the right ones, but you will have already limited some of that. So we go through this process, and we let everybody in the room come up with their own values. And then they whittle this down. And then I can look at that sheet, and I can determine very quickly what their top 1, 2, or 3 values are. And I pull those out, and I put them on the wall. And I go around to every person in the room, and I have them put their top 1, 2, or 3 values on the wall. And they may be some similar, or they may not. If they're similar, if somebody's already said apple, then and you've said apple, you just put a check mark next to it. And then we might have 5, 6, or 7 people who have checked apple as their highest value. But in many cases, they have different values, so we keep listing them all. And in some cases, we have 100, 150 values on the wall. And then we start to group those based on what they represent. And then we ask the people in the room to start eliminating those values. And no one can eliminate any value except their own. And you can't argue on behalf of a value. So I can't say, well, I put Apple up there and I think Apple's more important and I'm going to defend it. Can't do that. You can remove Apple if somebody else has put something up there that you think is more valuable. And we go through this process of self-elimination, if you will, and in the end, how many values do you think we want to end up with? 3 or fewer. You never want more than 3. This is invaluable. If you get your values wrong, everything else you do related to branding and or marketing is a waste of time and money. If you don't get the values right, everything else will be wrong. So, aren't you going to ask me? What are your core values, Jim? Somebody want to ask me? My core values: insight and outcome. Not because I care about them, that's what my clients care about. They want insights and they want outcomes. Isn't that clever? The name of my business is Ins and Outs. Partly because I wanted to demonstrate insight and outcomes, but also because my business model is I come in, I do my consulting, and I get out. I'm not there to manage their brand. I'm there to help them find it. They manage it, and they can bring me back periodically. I will come back in and get back out, but I don't want to be anybody's permanent consultant. That's my brand, insights and outcomes. And it works. But then I learned I had a tagline called Brands That Stand. And more people referred to me and my business as Brands That Stand, so I added that as the company name. I now operate under both. And people use them however they're most comfortable. It's not about me, it's about how they want to be perceived. And they wanted Brands That Stand. So that's what we use now. Do you understand that process of the values have to be critical? If you get them wrong, nothing else matters. So brand values. This is the essence I was talking about. Get them right, it's the first thing you have to do. And then you create what we call a brand vision. Now look, other people have other definitions, they have other terms. Okay, all that's well and good. Come up with whatever you want to call them. Some people use them differently than I use them. That's okay. This is the process I use. It's referred to as brand hierarchy. So I start with my values, and then I create a brand vision. A brand vision is how the world will see you as a result of your successful mission, or how the world will be different, I should say that. The world will be different as a result of what you've done. That's your vision. How will the world be different as a result of what you've done? And every single entity, every single human being can change the world. Every single one of us can change the world. The question is how. Then you have a brand mission. Brand mission is simple. It's a compelling handful of words that tell people what you do and then followed up by how you do it. If you don't get those words right, that little handful of words, it won't provoke the most important part is tell me how. Tell me why. So you got to get those words right. They have to be compelling. I'll give you a couple examples of that as we get deeper into this. And the last piece is where, this is my bread and butter, this is the brand positioning. And this is how you differentiate yourself from everybody else who says they do what you do. So take Elmhurst College as an example. What do? Provide an education. So do a lot of other places. So for their brand to be distinctive, they're going to have a distinct positioning. And I'm going to give you some examples of some of those as we go forward here. So let's talk about brand vision again. It has to be aspirational, and this is the part you're going to struggle with. It has to be unattainable. You cannot achieve a vision. You can't do a vision. A vision always has to be unattainable. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that in a second. Is there anybody in the room who can tell me their brand mission in 8 words or less? Anybody? Fire away. We enrich lives while having fun. Handful of words. Where do you do it? Where, specifically? Who is we?
Well, the staff is providing opportunities for fun for the
Whose staff? Which entity? See? Did you know she was with Elmhurst Park District when we started the conversation? It took a series of questions to get to that. Now go back and tell me your mission again. There you go. The Elmhurst Park District does what? Enriches lives while having fun. See, the context matters. You added context. Now I know that having fun is a critical element of being a park. That's kind of the issue, is that I have to ask how. Now, how do you do that? And if I don't ask how, you don't have a compelling mission statement. And I am prepared to ask how, but I won't ask you to answer it now. So always got to lead to tell me more. It always begins with what you do and should supply the how you do it. But this is critical. It's always about the why. So I would ask you in your mission statement to focus on adding that aspect of why you do it. I know that you are trying to provide fun, but that's a mechanism to something else. So what is it? And I'm not going to ask you to answer that, but I'm saying that's the piece that you want to include. This is the tough one. This is the thing that it almost always requires somebody who has a lot of experience to do. You have to have a differentiated offering. What are the distinguishing characteristics that separate your brand from everybody else's? Literal characteristics. You have to have a very unique value proposition. Why would I do this? What do I get out of it? And you have to have a clearly defined, limited targeted audience. The narrowest possible audience, not the widest. You don't want to appeal to the most people in your brand. You want to appeal to the smallest number, the most finite audience you can come up with. And you're all sitting there and your eyes are telling me, no, I don't. No, I don't. Well, yes, you do. And I'm going to show you examples of what I mean by that. But I wanted you to see the whole architecture first, and then I'll take you back through how that architecture works. So I mentioned the elements of a brand. I did a lot of work with the March of Dimes, and we rebranded them, and their differentiated offering became really clear. They do research, provide information, and they do it in ways nobody else does it. Did you know that they invented the term NICU? Neonatal intensive care units was invented by the March of Dimes. They designed it, and they tell you what constitutes a NICU. Did you know that they were the same people that recognized what folic acid does? And they were so powerful in it that they got the federal government to mandate that every grain sold in this country is enriched with folic acid before it's sold to the public. You can't buy a box of cereal, a loaf of bread that hasn't had folic acid added to it. And the reason for that is the March of Dimes found out that if a woman takes folic acid before she conceives, it must happen before she conceives, the likelihood of her having a child with a neuromuscular disease is almost zero. If she has enough folic acid before she conceives, we can overcome spina bifida, anencephaly, and a whole bunch of other diseases. They were the ones who discovered it, and it was so compelling, the federal government said, we'll force it into the diet. We'll put it in there. It's a simple B vitamin. It's harmless. It can't hurt you. It's natural. They came up with it. You didn't know that, did you? But it is compelling, right? They also came up with a product called surfactant. You probably heard that term. It's used, surfactant is used scientifically, it's used industrially. There's a lot of different ways to use surfactant. But they came up with it in a different, altogether different meaning. This is a non-medical term, so don't hold me to this, but the lungs are covered with a substance, a gooey substance, and that's what helps convert oxygen into the bloodstream. That's surfactant. When babies are preemies, it typically means that they weren't developing surfactant. And so they suffocate and die. That's what most preemies do if they don't survive. They realized that, and they figured out how to harvest that surfactant from healthy babies. They put it in a gas, and they give every child that's born in America 3 puffs of that gas right after they're born. Every child gets that when you're in a maternity ward. As soon as they're born, they get 3 puffs of gas. It's got surfactant, and the lungs are so miraculous that whenever they're exposed to surfactant, they begin producing it immediately. Did you know that? And you cannot survive without surfactant. And then they figured out how to make it. So they have an artificial version of it, and they figured out how to sell that. So now they don't have to harvest it out of healthy babies, they can actually make it. Every child that is born in America gets a dose of surfactant. Thank you, March of Dimes. You didn't know that, did you? I wanted you to understand that because I also want you to know who their target audience is. I fought with my own board members because they kept saying, well, everybody cares about healthy babies. And I said, no, they don't. Not the way we care. What we care about is who wants to have a healthy baby. Men can't have babies, so they're not our target audience. Men don't have babies. They may have an interest, but they're not having the baby. Most grandparents aren't having babies. They have an interest, but they don't have the baby. And 50% of all women are in the wrong age category. They're too young or too old to conceive. So they're not our target audience. Oh, and guess what? Of all of the babies that are born in America, 52% of those are unplanned pregnancies. 52% are unplanned pregnancies. Now that may be old data. I've been using that for a while, but that's what it was. I'm just giving you a number at this point. It's a big number. Don't hold me to that number, but it's big. So if they're unplanned pregnancies, they're not our target audience. We want people who want to have healthy babies, right? So now you have a very narrow target audience. A woman who deliberately chooses to have a healthy baby. That's a very small audience. And then I say to you, you build concentric circles away from that target. Everything we say and do is about satisfying that target's interest. So now there's another circle around her, and that's the family, the husband, the grandparents. So every message we direct to them is in the context of how it affects her. Remember, it's always about them, it's not about us. So we send a message out that says to dads, please don't drink and smoke around a pregnant woman because it's going to be a temptation or it could actually have a direct negative effect on her. We say to the grandparents, encourage healthy eating habits. You see what I'm talking about? Concentric circles, but it's always directed at the person in the middle. So we're going to talk core value. Can anybody tell me what they think the Disney core value is? It's one word. Keep going. No, not you, you know. You're getting close. You said magical. Keep going. You're close. Say that again. Louder. That's it. The core value of Disney is imagination. That is their core value. You know the people that work there are called Imagineers? Right? So I put this up there on purpose because these two entities are essentially down the street from each other. Universal in Orlando is basically down the street from Disney. What separates them? Their core value. They're both theme parks. They're both family fun. What separates them? What is the core value at Universal? Anybody? Say that aloud, really loud. That's it. So one park is focused on imagination and one park is focused on adventure. So immediately it changes your target audience. Little kids, 5-year-old and 6-year-olds, they want magic carpet rides. They want to be a princess. They want to do that stuff. A little bit older kids want to kind of get excited. They want to be scared a little bit. So they're more involved in the adventure side of the equation. So typically a 14-year-old will not find Disney as much fun as they would Universal. So it skews a little bit older. So here's my favorite example. I was doing some work at Disney and they had told me all about this imagination thing. I said, okay, we had a meeting. Then after the meeting, I went to my hotel room knowing that we would have meetings the next morning, and I'm walking back to the meetings, and I'm looking around the park, and I see workers taking down all of the fall decorations. They have harvest fall decorations everywhere and putting up all the Christmas decorations. They have 35,000 poinsettia plants in that one park alone. They have 650 Christmas trees that they have to put up in that park. It's massive. And I'm watching these guys string lights and put up Christmas trees, and I go to the meeting and I said, I thought we were about imagination. Oh, we are. Wait till this is done. People are going to spark their imagination. I said, no, you don't get it. If we were really about that, we would change our behaviors. You can't send a kid to bed at night and tell them that it's Thanksgiving and then watch the Christmas stuff get put up. When that kid went to bed at night, it was Thanksgiving. When they showed up in the park in the morning, it had to be Christmas already. That's imagination. If you can't convert the park at night when there's nobody here, you don't understand imagination. And guess what Disney does today? The whole park gets converted when there are no guests in it, overnight. See what I mean about behaviors? They had to behave that way. That's what we're looking for, is how do you adjust your behaviors so they match your ambitions? There are 4 basic types of brand relevance. How many of you think you're in a world in your business that's innovative? By show of hands. What you do is innovative. Very limited number, because it's the hardest thing to do. And what you have to do is offer real enhancement to be innovative. So what does it mean to be innovative as opposed to creative? Innovative is the ability to take something that is known and existing and reinvent it. That's innovation. I take something that everybody thinks they know and I do it in a way they've never seen before. Or you can be incremental in your brand. And so it has some impact, but it's only changing things. Obviously changing them. Can anybody name an incremental brand? Something that has a noticeable impact? How about in the airline business? Can you name an airline that works better? There you go. See how easy that is? Southwest is an incremental brand. It does it better. It has a noticeable impact. I always get that answer. It's the first word out of everybody's mouth. Southwest is a different kind of airline. And this is coming from a guy who's married to a woman that works for American. Substantial. So now you're going to create a new category. Can anybody name a new category that is brand relevant? Spotify, yes. Airbnb. They invented new categories. Transformational. Anybody? Name a brand that's transformational. Apple, Uber, Tesla. They're changing the entire landscape of their world. So those are the only kinds of relevant brands you can create. You have to pick one or more of those categories. This is one of my favorite quotes. Father Hesburgh from Notre Dame was famous for saying, "You cannot play an uncertain trumpet." And I love that line. You cannot play an uncertain trumpet. And my response has always been, what he's really saying is learn to tell better stories. Learn the best stories, but it's not about you. It's not about your business. It's not about your services. It is about the experience that your users have. So I see a soccer coach sitting right over here who I know pretty well. And aren't you related to the famous Willie Roy? Most days. This is Willie Roy's son. And Willie Roy was an infamous, tremendous soccer coach at the Chicago Sting, led them to greatness. And his sons have followed in his tradition. They are also great soccer people. So I would say to you, you have one of the most successful soccer clubs in the area, and it's renowned, people respect it. What's the distinguishing characteristic? It better not be winning. What is it? He's bringing in people who can serve other people. It's not about winning soccer. That becomes the byproduct. How many of you have kids who have played in soccer? And are you so tired of hearing about we have a winning program? That's how it's done. Everybody talks about we win. Okay, well you can win once or twice or three times, but you're not always going to win. Remember the message about the church? Soccer clubs should be more like a church where people remain even if it's not going well because they are faithful to the experience. And you might also be interested to know that in the last year, and that's why I pick on this, 1.3 million registered soccer players quit soccer in the past year. These are card-carrying registered soccer players who quit soccer in the last year. That's almost 1/3 of the registered soccer players in America. They quit. And why do they quit? Because the coaches give them a really bad experience. You either win or you get out. I'll find you another team. You're not good enough. Or you parents. We joke about this. I am a soccer coach. I hate this expression, but you ask another coach, what's the best team in the world to coach? Anybody have an answer? What's the best team in the world to coach? An orphanage. Because then you don't have to deal with the parents. And I personally find that offensive because I say to those same coaches, no 6-year-old ever signed up for soccer by themselves. Their parents brought them, and from the first day their parents brought them, you created a culture with and an environment that led them to become the parent you don't like. And by the way, coaches don't like parents. Most don't. Some do. I don't want to speak for all of them, but a lot of them don't. And it's a creature of their own doing. So I say that to you because your customers, your constituents, your stakeholders are in the same boat. If you have a customer you don't like, or you have constituents you don't like, you created them. Recreate them. So let's talk a little bit about disruption. Are any of you familiar with the Chicago Sinfonietta? A couple of you. 30-some years ago, we created the Chicago Sinfonietta. I was one of the founding board members and served as their first chairman of the board. I had never been to a symphony concert in my life. Didn't know my elbow from an oboe. And we built a stellar orchestra. And we did it because we knew how to be disruptive. And I said to them from the beginning, who is your competition? And they said to me, the Chicago Symphony, Music of the Baroque, Elmhurst Symphony, and they listed all these other orchestras. And I said, hold on a second. When do we play? We play Monday nights at Orchestra Hall, now Symphony Center. Nobody else plays on Monday night. The Chicago Symphony doesn't play on Monday nights. We do. So we're not competing with them. Who do you think we compete with on Monday night? Monday Night Football. And the whole board's like, what? We can't compete with football. And I said, then you need to leave. And we had 40 board members that day, and when we finished the day, we had 20. Because I meant it. If you don't believe you can compete, get out. That orchestra thrives. I don't think more than 2 or 3 of you have ever been to one of their concerts, and most of their concerts are sold out. They perform all over the world, and they are a very, very unique, very, very cool orchestra. The Chicago Tribune called them America's coolest orchestra. They are really good, and they don't play music the way you expect them to. And the people who play it aren't what you expect. Half of our musicians are women. More than 1/3 of them are people of color. You take all of the orchestras in New York City, the biggest orchestras, combined history of almost 500 years of those 4 major orchestras in New York City, they'd never had a black person in any of those orchestras up until a few years ago. The Detroit Symphony Orchestra never had a black member. Detroit, where the population is 65% African American, never had a black musician up until a couple of years ago. And they added 1 cello player because they get 1/3 of their money from the state legislature, and the legislature said, put a black person in. Our orchestra started that way. And we said, we're going to put on the stage an orchestra that looks like the community we serve in Chicago. and we're going to form a board that looks like that. And guess what? We sell out almost all of our concerts. And we play music in ways you've never heard it. It's tremendous. It's entertaining, it's engaging, and when you walk out of a Chicago Sinfonietta concert, you'll walk out like you were at a Star Wars movie, not at someone's funeral. And I used to say to them, go to watch the Chicago Symphony, and when the people walk out of the auditorium, they all have their heads down, they're very solemn, and it's like they just left Mass. You walk out of a Sinfonietta concert, and people are buzzing. They're like, whoa, that was so cool. What was that? I've never seen anything like that. That's what an orchestra does? Now, I'm not trying to promote ticket sales. I'm merely saying to you, you can create a brand apart from everybody else. So much so that the MacArthur Foundation gave the Chicago Sinfonietta a $1 million unrestricted grant last year. First time in history. $1 million. It's the biggest contribution ever, and told them you can do what you need to with the money. No restrictions. Not many people do that. And you might also be interested to know the city of Chicago gave them a $100,000 award as the single most innovative entity in the city of Chicago, of any type. The #1 most innovative entity in the city of Chicago, the Chicago Sinfonietta. My point is, if you understand your brand, you will stand out. And what you should really focus on is none of you know them. And that's okay, you're not their audience. We don't need to appeal to everybody. We don't need everybody to be aware of us. And I say that because of this. Never confuse awareness with affinity. The fact that people know who you are does not mean they are committed to you. Don't confuse them. Affinity is vital. Awareness is not. Now, you might need awareness to create some affinity, but we have a very loyal following at the Sinfonietta, and we're not particularly well known. We don't need to be. We've got our audience. Someone said to me during the break, I'm so glad to hear that you don't need to be really focused on the awareness thing, that you have to have that distinctiveness because they have a distinctive business, but they're not as well known yet. And it was interesting because the person that introduced us was a customer of theirs and pointed out by saying they do some really innovative, really unique things. And I thought, okay, that's what you want. It was that word of mouth that helps sell more than anything else. The greatest endorsement you can get in the world is not from an ad. It's from a third party. When you can get someone else to say something good about what you do to another person, that's success. And the example I was going to provide, as I came back up here, played into that beautifully. Have you all heard of a little company called Starbucks? 37,000 stores or whatever number they have these days. How many of you are used to seeing Starbucks ads? None of you, because they didn't build their business on advertising. They built their business based on user experience. That's how they built that empire. Not by advertising, not by telling people we have better coffee. So let's delve into that a little bit, because they're one of my favorite examples. This is called Blue Ocean Strategy. By show of hands, have any of you seen this book before? Have any of you used this book? A couple of you. Can I ask, just by show of hands again, were you successful using it? Those same hands did not go up. Okay, so here's my point. This book was written some time ago by a couple of Harvard professors, and it's really got some phenomenal theory in it. It's really a terrific approach. The problem is that it's built on the concept that you want to find clear blue ocean where there's no competition, where you can dominate. And they try to help you determine what blue ocean really looks like. You don't want to be in the red ocean because that's where all the sharks are eating each other. And so the water is red and bloody. The problem with blue ocean, as I learned, and a lot of my clients have come to me because they tried blue ocean and it didn't work, is that you must first have a compelling base. It's pretty logical that I can't go somewhere if I don't know from where I came. So they're asking you to jump into blue water, but if you don't know what your foundation was, you will struggle. And unfortunately, the book doesn't tell you how to establish the base or how to determine the origin of your journey. They only tell you where you should be. And what I'm getting at is what I've just walked you through, that brand hierarchy of the values, the vision, the mission, and positioning. That's the foundation that has to be in place before you can take a leap into these unknown, uncharted waters. Okay? So I wanted you to be familiar with that. The VI in the middle of that stands for value innovation. That's what Blue Ocean is really about. How do I lower my costs and raise my value? To do that, you either have to eliminate something, reduce something, raise something, or create something. Those are the ways you do that. It's a very cool book, and I would say that if you were in the business, you might be interested in most of the book. If you're not in the business I'm in, you're going to be interested in the back half of the book. Oh no, I got it backwards. The front half of the book, where they tell these really compelling case studies. There's some really interesting stories in the book. But then they tell you how that happens, and it gets very technical and very scientific and very boring. So if you're not in the business, you won't enjoy that part, but the front of the book is really exciting. And what they do is they take you through a couple of terrific case studies. This is one of them. You can't see those all clearly, but you don't need to see the individual things. I meant to give you a better slide than this, and I goofed. But each of those circles represents one of the performances in a casino somewhere on the Las Vegas Strip where Cirque du Soleil has a program. Each of those circles represents a separate Cirque du Soleil show on the Las Vegas Strip. There are now actually 9 different casinos that have a Cirque du Soleil show. Are you all familiar with Cirque du Soleil? So what is Cirque du Soleil all about? What is its purpose? With whom do they compete? Who is their target audience? All of that stuff. And by the way, I would say to you, the first thing you can almost always ignore is your competition. Don't focus on your competition. They are not important. What's important are the people you want to attract. So what did Cirque du Soleil say? They studied the people. And the people they wanted were the people who said, I don't like animals in my circus. That's bothersome to me. I'm an animal rights person. So they took all the animals out. And when they took the animals out, what did they take out? All the cost. The transportation, the feeding, the vets, all the training, the housing of animals, all that expense went away. They don't have to lug animals around the world. So there are no animals. And they satisfied the customers because the customers, frankly, were feeling guilty about seeing these animals. So that's value innovation. They figured out how to do that. And then they said, with whom would we normally compete? Well, people think they're a circus. That's what Cirque du Soleil means. Circus of the Sun, right? But guess what? They're still in business. Barnum and Bailey, Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey went out of business. It's bankrupt. Gone. Doesn't exist anymore. Why? Barnum and Bailey sold $10 tickets, and they couldn't get 1,500 people to show up in the auditorium. Cirque du Soleil's average ticket price, not in Vegas, I'll give you that in a minute, their average ticket price is $85 a seat. They sell out virtually every performance. In Vegas, the average ticket price is well over $200 a seat, and they do sell out every single performance. They have 9 shows in Las Vegas, all running at the same time at different casinos. What makes them different? Each show has its own theme. No two are alike. They're not repeating any of it. And what they've done is they've decided that they want to be competing with live theater, not with circuses. So when you go in, you have a theatrical experience. And all that sounds very exciting. But here's the real beauty. In every single performance, they pull someone out of the audience and they put them in the show. And that customer keeps reappearing over and over again in different parts of the show. Have you ever seen it? If you go and you see Cirque du Soleil, they'll pull somebody literally out of the audience and put them in the show. And it's exciting because the shows are really daring. They do some phenomenal theatrical things. They're all very, very different. What does that say when they put that person in that show? Please, somebody, what's the message I've been trying to get across today? I see me. They take somebody out of the audience and they put them in the show, and you say, that could have been me. Now, 2/3 of the audience are saying, thank God that's not me. But the other third are saying, I could have been that person. And you associate with that person more than you do some of the others. Every one of their shows has its own original music. They don't repeat any of that. They all have their own storytelling, and every single one of them has a narrator. They replace the ringmaster, and they put a speaker, someone who takes you through the story, a narrator. It is storytelling in the finest form. So much so that they can have 9 shows on the same street competing with themselves. And guess where their revenue comes from? At $85, well, it's over $200 a seat in Vegas on average, and they sell them all out. But 35% of their revenue comes from merchandise. Think about that. 35% comes from merchandise, and they sell 0 merchandise in the theater. It's all sold in a retail store adjacent to the theater. So as you leave the theater, you walk through the retail store. And it's 35% of their revenue. And what are people buying? They're buying the music. They're buying the jackets. They're buying photo books, all kinds of cool little things, but they raise a lot of money doing that. They have recreated circus, and they put those other guys out of business in doing it. That's value innovation, and they do it for a fraction of the cost of a typical circus, which gives them more money to invest and do it better. I love Cirque du Soleil. I actually like going to the shows, but I love their story even more. This is one of my personal favorites. This little baby is called the Acco Swingline Fascinator. Yes, I came up with the name. I'm going to take credit. But I thought that was pretty cool. It's a stapler. Get it? Fascinator? So you stick a piece of paper in the open end of it, and all those gears move. The levers all move, and it makes a lot of noise. And it gives you one staple. So they came up with it at Acco, and they said, how would you market it? By the way, that little contraption sells for about $15. It lists for $25, but it sells for $15. You buy a little black Swingline stapler, because that's the company that owns it, Swingline. You buy a little black Swingline for what, $3, $4? Why would I spend $15 on this? And by the way, all those parts are different colors, and they put them all in bins, and there are millions of combinations. No 2 of those look alike. Some have yellow bases, some have blue bases, some have green bases, some have a red lever, some have a yellow lever. No 2 are identical. But you can get them for $15. And I thought, the minute I saw it, I did not know what it was, but the minute I saw it, I said, I want one. I want one, but I didn't know what it was. I just knew I liked it. I like it, I want one. And so we made that the campaign. And you see the box that it's in? We created those boxes, and on the right-hand side where it says electronic stapling machine, that's a little curtain that rises when you lift the lid. And so that curtain reveals the stapler, and it plays a fanfare. It actually, there's a little chip in there, it goes bum, ba, ba, bum, ba, bum, and it reveals that. We did 500 of those, and we sent them out. Remember what I said about having to be disruptive? We sent one to Ellen DeGeneres, and she built an entire episode of her, the old show where she was in the coffee shop, the episode show that years ago. She built an entire episode around this stapler. We sent one to Regis Philbin, Kathy Lee, the entire day. It was about this stapler. We sent one to David Letterman. He used it the entire show, all the way through the show. We sold out 1 year's worth of production, and we did no other marketing. We just sent them to decision makers and influencers, and we got a year's worth of production sold out of it. Because we decided to do something very disruptive. We put 500 of them in boxes, and we sent them to people of influence. Now, sending things to people of influence has become very fashionable. We did this 20 years ago. Nothing's changed. It's still about appealing to people. And you have to be disruptive when you do it. And I have one of these, and guess what we did with it? This is the really big part. We said you can't make a better stapler, so let's not even think about what its performance is. Let's treat it like a fashion statement. I want one on my desk because it makes a fashion statement. 7 separate times, the New York Times fashion section wrote about this stapler in the fashion section of the New York Times. Because we told them it was a fashion statement, not a stapler. And I know it's a fashion statement because my son had never seen this until a few months ago, and he asked me if he could have one for his desk. I want to tell you a little bit different story. This is about how you focus on behaviors. EVO Soccer and Life Sports, it's a client of mine. They're actually better known as Zara, but it's not the Zara sportswear out of Spain that you see on Michigan Avenue. It's a soccer manufacturing company. They only make soccer uniforms, and they only make them for the club environment. They don't sell them at retail. You have to be in a soccer club to buy them. They've been a client of mine for many years, and I decided they couldn't compete with Nike, and they couldn't compete with Adidas one-to-one. Those guys have mega dollars. We can't compete with that. So what we did was we spent the last 20 years developing soccer programs that are unique for soccer clubs. We have a software package that will help you decide, parent and juniors in high school, to decide what college suits you best based on your academic interest, your finances, your geography, your area of study, and your soccer abilities. And we put all that information into a 2-hour session, and we will spit out 5 schools that your child should apply to based on all those factors. That's one of about 40 programs. We have another program that I'm most proud of. It's called No Victory Without Honor. And what we do is we give every soccer team in a soccer club a flag, one of those teardrop flags, and there's a stanchion at the field, and you put that flag on the ground when your team's ready to play. If you get a red card, or if you get a series of yellow cards during the game, you lose your flag. You have to maintain good parent conduct, player conduct, and coaching conduct, and you get to keep your flag. When we started the program in California, we had 49,000 families in the program, in this one big soccer club, 49,000 families. And they said, what do you think is going to happen? We had 900 teams that were represented there. Of those 900 teams, we thought, well, let's see how this goes. Red cards, which is when you get expelled from the game, dropped by 80% in the first 10 weeks. Yellow cards, which is a caution, which means you get another one, you're going to get kicked out of the game, that fell by 50%. All in 10 weeks. So we did it for a second 10 weeks, and they thought, well, probably not as many teams are going to be involved because there's really no incentive for them other than they get to keep the flag, and we went up to 1,200 teams who signed up to do it from 900 teams because something changed. The referees didn't have to worry about screaming parents anymore. Parents didn't have to worry about having to compete and tell their kid, this is what you should be doing, because now everybody understood that conduct mattered. There is no victory without honor. That's the name of the program. And all of a sudden, everything turned around. And now, when we were having trouble previously getting referees because people were so hostile to them, now we've got people signing up to be referees. And we were getting better referees. And when you get better referees, parents have fewer things to complain about. And when parents have fewer things to complain about, more referees show up. Do you get the cycle? Behavior changes everything. We have 40 different programs like that, safety programs and all those types of things. So the NHL found out about that, and they called and said, could you do that for the NHL? So Zara and Life Sports is now converted and created these same types of programs for the NHL, and we developed a program called the Declaration of Principles. And last year, the NHL adopted that as a formal program. If you want to be an NHL club, or you want to be an NHL-sanctioned hockey rink, or you want to have an NHL youth program, you must subscribe to the Declaration of Principles. It's 9 specific principles. And I'll just give you a couple of them. Hockey must be fun for everyone, including parents. That's one of their principles. No child should only play hockey. They should play multiple sports. That's one of their principles. That's the NHL saying we don't want kids who just play hockey. We want kids who play other sports as well. Well-rounded. Every form of hockey is valuable. We're not just interested in ice hockey, we want every form of hockey. So they go through these principles. And so we then got a phone call from the Soccer Coaches Association. It's the largest coaching association in the world. It's called United Soccer Coaches. They have almost 50,000 members. And the woman that runs that's a friend of mine, and she said, I can see your fingerprints all over that declaration. You did that with them, didn't you? And I said, yeah, I did. She goes, do it for us. So we now have the Coach's Cornerstone. It's 7 principles that are very different from the hockey ones, but in some ways similar, that now every soccer coach in America has been asked to sign on and run their program based on their behaviors, these 7 principles. And they have now begun signing on. Last time I checked, we had about 10,000 coaches that had signed on and said, this is how I will run my soccer club going forward. I will do it with principles. And I won't do it worried about winning, because winning doesn't get it done. I tell you that because to be able to affect change, you have to change behavior first, and then everything else follows. And all of those kids who have dropped out of soccer, 1.3 million kids dropped out of soccer in the last year because of the experience they were having, which has been pretty negative. And that's coaches who create bad environments. But there are a lot of good coaches, and the good ones, I think, are the ones who are going to do really well. You happen to have one of them here, by the way. Dave is a terrific coach. So I want to show you a couple of things here. There are 10 steps that you can go through, and as I said, I can share this with you. What's the number one issue we worry about? It's always about them, it's never about us. You have to focus on multi-directional communications. It can't be, here's what I have to tell you. You have to create an environment where it can go back and forth. How do I hear my customers? And I'm going to give you an example of that. McDonald's was a client of mine for many years, and we were focused on the children's market. And there was a guy by the name of Chuck Rubner, and he oversaw all children's marketing for McDonald's. Brilliant guy. And so we put a camera on a dolly that was 2 feet off the ground. And we had it in the parking lot. And we walked it through the parking lot. And we showed all the litter that was in the parking lot. And then we showed the curb that was a little too tall for a little kid to get up by themselves. And then we showed a door handle that a kid couldn't open on a McDonald's. And then we took it inside and we showed that the Happy Meal display, the Happy Meal was up here and the kid was down here. The toy was up here, the kid was down here. We had the toy up where parents could see it, but not the kid. And then they got to the counter and they had what they call a bullet nose. Maybe this has one, yeah. This edge, it's called a bullet nose, but the bullet nose was like 6 or 8 inches long. So when a kid goes to the counter, they can hang their fingers on the edge of it, but they kind of slide back. And they're looking up the nostrils of the clerk, the salesperson. So we decided to put a set of steps in so that a kid could be almost eyeball to eyeball with the clerk. And we taught the clerks that what they needed to do was ask the child what they want. Don't just look at mom and dad. 52% of all visits to McDonald's are initiated by a child's request. And then we ignore them when they get there. So this video was so powerful because we showed what the child experienced. When they're coming into the restaurant, all they see are dirty fingerprints all over the glass. But when the employee goes down to clean the glass, they clean here, but they don't clean here. So we taught them, you got to clean down there where 52% of the customers are. That's what I'm getting at when I talk about this multi-directional. We had to actually talk to kids. We had to understand what kids felt and saw. Always show empathy. What does it mean? Anybody? What is empathy? Just shout it out.
Putting yourself in someone else.
That's it. Putting yourself in someone else's place. How do they see it? And that takes us right back to, I see me. But empathy is absolutely critical. How does it affect them? Understand the interest, or the benefit of borrowed interest. So I'm going to go back to the soccer example because it's so easy for me. I talk to soccer clubs all over the world, and one of the things they tell the youth players is, or the families of the youth players is, we wear all the best brands. Our whole club is an Adidas club, or we're a Nike club. I got news for you, folks. That's borrowed interest. What you're doing is you're building brand for Nike, but you're not necessarily building brand for you. And if you think that by promoting Nike, you're promoting your brand, then you need to talk to some of the clubs who are now finding out that Nike has raised the prices beyond where they can charge. And oh, by the way, Nike has changed its manufacturing so that you are required to replace all uniforms every 2 years. Kids don't wear out uniforms in 2 years. But Nike makes sure you have to buy new ones because they won't sell you replacements. They discontinue the line every 2 years, in most cases, not all. Or let's say that you have boys and girls. 52% of all soccer players are females in this country. 52% are females. Guess what? In the World Cup, only 8 teams out of all of those teams wore women's uniforms. Not this one, but the World Cup, not this last one, the one before that. They wore men's uniforms. And you know how that gets sold? The people, the administrators of the soccer clubs are told, just buy all boys and men's sizes and just give the girls smaller ones. So I wrote an article for Soccer America. I write for various publications as well. And I said, that's soccer's dirty little secret. All these girls play, and everybody's telling them they got to have $200 pair of shoes because shoes make a difference, but apparently shorts and shirts don't. Because if you want to know what it's like to be a girl and play soccer, men, I want you to take a pair of shorts that are 2 sizes too small, and I want you to put them on backwards. And then I want you to take a jersey that's 2 sizes too big, and I want you to run around like that for 20 minutes, and you will know what it's like to be a girl soccer player. Because shorts have to have more room in the back for girls and more room in the front for the boys. So when you put them on backwards, you have just the opposite of what you might want. And guess what, gentlemen? You're going to feel a little compressed up front. And by the way, with the jersey, what you're going to feel is what every girl feels when she puts on a boy's jersey. The drop on the sleeve is so severe because the shoulders are so wide that they invented their own little device. They take a little piece of Velcro and they hook the sleeve up on their shoulders, and they all walk around with these little Velcro things because the sleeves are too long and they irritate them. And Nike will tell you that your uniform matters? Baloney. Because they try to convince you that girls can wear boys' clothes. Sorry, they're not built the same way. So we go through this process where I try to point out, and I'm not anti-Nike, I like Nike a lot, I know their story really well, and I love them. But I can tell you that you don't want to focus on borrowed interest. If you decide you want to have an air conditioning business, and you're going to promote the fact that all of your trucks are Mercedes trucks, you're going to sell a lot of Mercedes trucks, but it doesn't mean you're going to sell a lot of air conditioning. Focus on your business, not borrowed interest. We talked about this earlier, narrowcast, the narrowest possible audience, and then work out of concentric circles. Focus on the thriving stakeholder. What's it mean to thrive? Focus on that. Don't focus on selling. Don't focus on just getting more eyeballs. Focus on the people that thrive. You have to create, and then you have to drive a culture. Culture is critical. And what does it mean to have a culture? It means these are how my people behave when I'm not there. I had a pretty big size ad agency in Chicago for a number of years. And then I found out there were things happening there when I wasn't there. And I went to my partner and said, you're buying me out. Because I don't want my name on the door of a place where when I'm not here, they behave in a way that I am not proud of. And she's like, seriously? You can never make this much money out on your own. I said, watch me. I'm in my 25th year of working the way I work today because I realized that being an employer with 150 people and those people weren't all of the same culture was not where I wanted to be. So the failure was mine for not creating the right culture where they could be that. But I decided I can't do that. And I would say to you, if your people don't understand how to express your culture, you have the wrong people. Find people who understand your culture and can live it for you. And they will help influence it. They will help change it. They will help make it better. It's not dictatorial. It's not just what you want, but create a culture that people can live with and can be proud of. I once said to a client, I said, bring me in your newest employee. They had thousands of employees. They brought this young woman in, and I said to her, you've just started here. What are you going to tell your family at Thanksgiving about where you work? She was just new, and it was like October. And she said, well, I'm going to tell them I work at this great company, blah, 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 blah. I said, well, but what are you going to tell them you do? Well, then she struggled a little bit. And I said, why are you struggling? And she said, because I haven't really been trained. Oh, I got the CEO sitting next to me. And so I said to them, do you know who John so-and-so is? She goes, I've heard of him. And I said, what do you think he would say if he knew you have been here for weeks and you've never been trained? And wait a minute, aren't you in customer service? She goes, yeah, that's my job. And I said, and you're in customer service, but you haven't been trained. Right. I said, what do you think John would say? She goes, I don't know. I don't even know who he is. I just know he's the head of the company. He's sitting next to me. So I said, thanks very much. And she left. And I said, John, you want to go back and revisit that statement where you told me all your people embraced your culture? This woman doesn't even know where she works. And she doesn't know who you are. And I would think she would, because she's about 6 offices away from you. She didn't have a clue. Build culture. And the way you do it is you constantly bring people in and say, what does this mean to you? How are you interpreting it? I had a client in Washington, D.C., and the office manager said to me, I hear you saying that, but I don't understand how I'm supposed to interpret culture. And I said, well, give me an example. She goes, well, I deal with all of our vendors, all of our suppliers, and we have bunches and bunches of them. And it's an organization called the Alaska Wilderness League. It's one of the preeminent environmental rights groups in all of Washington. And you've probably never heard of them because they work under the radar. You've heard of the Audubon Society, and you've heard of all the other groups. But these guys are the ones who actually do all the work up on the Hill. For those groups, you know better. But Alaska Wilderness League is extremely well respected in Washington. So I said to her, well, what's your problem? She goes, I don't know how I can do it in my job, because all I do is I send out notes to vendors and, billing and that kind of stuff. So I said, let's do a thank you card. You send them all thank you notes, right? She goes, yeah, I do. That's one of the things we do. That's part of our culture, is to thank people. And I said, okay, so we're going to do a card, and they're one of the symbols they use to represent their business are elk. They are trying to protect all of Alaska, but elk are very endangered. And so I said, we're going to show an illustration of a herd of elk. And all you're going to see are the antlers. And it's just an illustration. It's not real life. It's kind of comic-y. And then way in the back, it's going to imply that there's hundreds or thousands of them in the forefront. In the back, you're going to see one pair of antlers. And inside the card, it's going to say, thank you for helping us to stand out among the herd. She goes, oh, I can do that. I said, that's all we're talking about here, is find ways to interpret our brand in ways that it affects your job. I have another client in Atlanta. They wanted to be the preeminent, and you would know them, Russ, they wanted to be the preeminent fundraising consulting firm in the country. They couldn't, not because you are. They wanted to do it, and yet they were so Southern. I mean, they talk Southern, they act Southern. So I said to them, let's create a brand that's called Southern Sensibility. And we did. We created 8 things that distinguish a Southern firm and the way that distinguishes them. And then we started looking at all the aspects of that. The next time I called there, when you got their hold music, it was Georgia on My Mind. And everything they did started to reflect their Southern sensibility, including the chief operating officer did a Southern cookbook. And she went to all of their clients and said, give me your favorite Southern recipe and where it came from. Give me the backstory. So on one side, you have the history of the South and what it means to be a Southerner. And on the next page, you have their favorite biscuit recipe. And you flip the page, and there's another aspect of Southern living, a personalized story, and another recipe. 10 years in a row, they published different cookbooks every year, but their clients and their fans became very, very proud of the fact that they were featured in this Southern cookbook. And they stopped trying to be America's firm and were very comfortable being the South. Doesn't mean they don't have customers in the North. It means they have their own identity. Always want engagement. I want to engage them. I don't want to just talk to them. Disrupt the marketplace. Number one, it's always about them. I see me. So you're going to see them all up here again on one page in case you missed one. But I will share this with you. You can get the entire presentation. Now, remember the ratings that you did when we first started? Can you pull those out, please? I asked you to rate me. Not the official rating page. Remember the very first thing I asked you to do was, how am I doing? And I asked you to write a few words down. Go back to that page. Not the rating page we gave you, but your own little notes. You wrote a word or a little expression, a word or a couple of words. So go back and look at that. And now I want you to ask yourself, did what we've been through support that or change that? And if so, how? And you don't have to share it with me. I want you to recognize that behaviors are what changes a brand. When you first saw me in those first 3 seconds, you formed an opinion about who I was. It's inevitable. Everybody does it. I'm not offended. Some like, some dislike, some say I don't care for him, he's ugly, he's fat, he's whatever. That's okay. He's old. I get that all the time. Every day somebody asks me if I'm retired. No, I'm not retired. I'm busier than I've ever been. So my point to you, and I have a client who calls me Yoda. And he doesn't do it because of my wisdom. He does it because he thinks I look like Yoda. So my point is, I have that thick skin, but I want you to look at that and I want you to say to yourself, how did your impression change? Or did it not? Did it get reinforced? That's all I want you to do. And it's personal for you. I don't need to know. I can live without an answer. But I want you to think about it because everything you do, your brain is wired to draw on previous information, billions of pieces of information. And the minute you see something, you assess it. And your brain wants to figure out how it already knows what it's looking at. That's how the brain works. It wants to figure out what information it has that can identify it and immediately give it a label. And then it sometimes changes or it evolves. So I wanted you to be aware of that because it affects your brand as well. Your brand is determined by not only the first impression, but how you try to manifest behaviors after the first impression. That was the whole point of that exercise. And I don't need to know it, I just want you to be aware that it may or may not have changed for you. I'm at my last slide, but this is the point at which I open it up to any comments or questions. Anybody want to throw something at me other than tomatoes? Any comments or questions? Yes. Marty's got a microphone for you. Anybody, anything? Because we're still about 20 minutes before we need to break.
So when we were talking about brand values, you mentioned not necessarily to have those values be moral statements, but rather work ethic statements. Mm-hmm. What is some good example of work ethic statements?
Disney's Imagination, Universal's, I just drew a blank, Adventure. Here's a fun one. What's the core value of Starbucks? This is their original and real core value. Anybody? What do you think the core value of Starbucks is? Not community. There is an experience, but what is that experience? Their official value, self-indulgence. Do you get it? Why else would you pay $5 for a cup of coffee? And what can I tell you about that is they don't have the name coffee in their logo anymore. They took coffee out of the logo. It's just Starbucks now. And let me also add, if you were Starbucks, what the heck has that got to do with coffee? And yet, it's synonymous with coffee today. You can build a brand. You don't have to advertise. You have to create a better experience. And they built 30-some thousand stores by creating a better experience and virtually no advertising. So let me think of other brand values. Who else has a brand value? What is the core value of Nike? I love this. Anybody? Nope, that's their slogan. But that slogan reflects their core value. What is their core value? They have 3 core values, but the number one by far, it is way up here, and then they have 2 more that are down here. The number one core value is individualism. Their second is sustainability, and their third is achievement. So I'm going to stay on that for a minute. If you go to their campus, I love this story in Oregon. They have 22 buildings that are on their campus, and all of those buildings were built on the terrain as it was found. They did not use a single bulldozer. They built on whatever they found because they believe in sustainability. And when you use bulldozers, you scar the earth and you affect sustainability. So they built literally on what they saw. They collect all the rain that falls on their property and they recycle it. They purify it. And they are the first company in history to get what is known as salmon certification. The water that they process is pure enough for salmon. That is the purest water in the world. And they use that water for drinking, for cooking, for bathing on their campus. They recycle all of it. Those 22 buildings that they built are 76% recycled materials because they believe in sustainability, not just athletic, but in every form. So I'm going to stay on the Nike story because I think you're going to find this fascinating when you look at their values. They believe in individualism. That's their number one value. So when you go to work at Nike, the first thing you do is you go to the campus, and the main street that takes you into their property is called Bill Bowerman Way. Bill Bowerman was the coach, the track and field coach at Oregon, and that's where Nike was formed. He was the founder of Nike, but he was the track coach at Oregon. And he had a couple of athletes there. One of them was a guy who had a strange gait, and that gait means that he couldn't run evenly. And so Bill wanted to fix that gait. So he took some liquid resin, some blue resin, and he poured it into his wife's waffle maker at home. And he made this blue sole for the bottom of a shoe, and he glued it on to this runner's shoe, and that runner's gait improved. Now he was running evenly and smoothly. Can anybody tell me who that runner was? Steve Prefontaine, world-famous champion. And there was another guy that was on the same team, but he wasn't very good. And his name was Phil Knight, who eventually became the head of Nike. So here's the rest of the story. If you go there, you go to Bill Bowerman Way, but they believe in individualism so much that every one of the 22 buildings is named for another person. They don't have a women's apparel business building. They have a Mia Hamm building. They don't have a golf building, they have a Tiger Woods building. They don't have a running track in the middle of the whole campus, they have a Michael Johnson. They don't have a soccer field in the middle of that track, they have a Ronaldo. Everything is named for someone because they believe in individualism. But they also believe in sustainability, so no motorized vehicles are allowed anywhere on campus. They have bicycles, they have scooters, they have skateboards, they have lots of personal power, and you can use it wherever you find it, and you can leave it wherever you want. Wherever you want to go on campus, you can take personal transportation, but you can't take a motorized vehicle. And oh, that soccer field, they invented a surface that is organic, but it never needs to be mowed and it never needs to be watered. And that's the Nike turf. And that track that I told you about, They took 70, 80,000 pairs of old Nike shoes. They ripped the soles off them, they ground them up, and they made the preeminent running surface in America. That track is all old soles of shoes because they believe in sustainability. If you go to their cafeteria, they serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner all day long because they're doing business all over the world all day long, and they serve about 17 different cuisines because they have people from all over the world. So you can get any kind of food you want there any time of day. And if you go into the cafeteria, it costs you $10 to buy a meal, unless you bring your own utensils. And then the meal is free. And they will wash those plates and utensils for you and return them to you. But if you use theirs, it costs you $10 because they believe in sustainability. Do you understand how critical it is that all of your values are manifested across your entire organization every single moment of every single day? So I'm going to tell you a little more. If you go to work at Nike, the first thing they do is they put you on a bus and they take you to the University of Oregon and they make you run the track. You must run 1 mile around that track. And that while you're doing that, you have to focus on what Bill Bowerman meant to this company, because he was their track coach. And then you get back on the bus and you're taken down the road from their headquarters and you're taken to a little grotto in the woods. And it's a place of reflection. And you're expected to spend 1 hour in that grotto in silence, because that's the spot at which Steve Prefontaine died in an automobile accident. And they want you to know what Steve meant to this company. Steve's been dead many, many years, but they believe in individualism. See how powerful that story is? Have any of you ever heard that Nike story before? So if you go to work there as a salesperson, you know they have people, they send out regional salespeople. What do they call them? Anybody? They call them Ekins. E-K-I-N. It's Nike, spelled backwards. Because if you want to sell for this company, you're going to know our business and our customers forwards and backwards. And they tell these people on their graduation day, you go through 10 days of training there, first thing you do. And at the end of graduation, they tell you, please, we always have parties at the end, you know, big parties, and people probably have more to drink than they should, but they always tell them, please do not go out and get a tattoo. And then most of them go out and they have a tiny Nike logo put on the outside of their left ankle. And Nike has said over and over again, please don't do this. We don't support it. And yet the Ekins run out and they have that because it's a badge of honor to them. And they have this little Nike, and if you've made, anybody that's ever worked there, ask if they'll show you their little, because a lot of them have it. They have their little logo on their ankle. That's dedication to a brand. Yes, Richie?
That's a fascinating story.
Yeah.
Why the hell can't they figure out how to make little girl jerseys?
Why can't they make little girl? Because they can't make money or as much money doing it. So they've decided that they can convince soccer clubs, who are typically run by volunteer administrators, that, well, it's an inventory control problem. You don't want to have to carry all those different sizes for boys and girls and men and women. Just carry the boys and the men and let the girls wear the other stuff. So to me, there's an element of dishonor in that. And that's why I don't wear Nike. I will tell you that that's one of the first things we did at Zara. Every single thing we sell is boys, girls, men's, and women's sizes. And we keep every single jersey we design for a minimum of 5 years, so that you can always reorder for 5 years. You have to change your behaviors. Yes?
There's no doubt that Uber is a disruptive company, but they're losing billions of dollars. Do you think that long-term this is a sustainable company?
I'm not an expert on any of that, but from a brand perspective, I'll just talk about that. I think it's a sustainable brand, but I don't think it's going to be the brand we see today. I think it's going to change dramatically in the next 5 to 10 years. I don't think it'll be the way we see it today or the way we use it, but I think they're smart enough there that they will evolve. And I think any good brand knows that it must evolve. If you build something and think it's going to stay that way, Ray Kroc was a client of mine for many years, the founder of McDonald's, and Ray used to say, if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think Uber has that problem. They've grown so rapidly and so big that right now they're just trying to herd the cats. But at some point they're going to have to figure out what they want their brand to really be, and it's not what it is today. So beyond that, I can't tell you where they're going to go. Anybody else?
Get this gentleman in the back.
Do you believe that a brand and a culture has to come from the top down?
Yeah, I heard that question. Go ahead and repeat it for everybody in case they didn't.
Do you believe that the brand and culture of a company has to come from the top down?
Yes, absolutely. If it doesn't come from the top, it won't be consistent and it won't be authentic. It'll be misinterpreted. So, and I'll use Pan American Bank as the example. If the two leaders of that bank hadn't said, we want to do this and we're going to be in the entire thing, it would never have worked. Yeah, another question? Yeah.
How do you convince somebody that doesn't believe that it needs to change?
I used to have an expression with McDonald's. There were McDonald's operators who didn't buy into my logic and my process, and I used to say to them, stick with what you're doing. You'll drive your business right down to where you can handle it. And that's the truth. If you're not going to create a culture and you're not going to focus on building a better brand, you will be overtaken. It's that simple. Question?
Sorry if this is a bit out of field, but how relevant do you feel print media is nowadays, print advertising?
I regret that it's dying. It's not as relevant. I still get a newspaper at home, and I keep asking myself why. And I know why. It's because I believe in journalism, and journalists have to be paid, and those journalists deserve an income. But I think print is going to go away. I really do. I believe it's all going to be electronic. And I don't think that's bad. I just think we have to hire more journalists to do the other side as well. My opinions don't matter. Let me start with that. Okay, you've asked me about my opinions about a couple things. I don't really think it matters. I think everybody's got an opinion, and I think everybody should have an opinion. But in the end, I'm not a prognosticator. I can't tell you where the world's going to go. I can only tell you where the brands are. And I see some brands failing. But I also see in the newspaper world, if they were to be a little more proactive, they could make the adjustment much, much better. But they cling to some of the old habits. And they do that because the compensation is structured that way. It's hard to get people to change their behaviors if you don't also change their compensation. But people still get paid to sell print ads. Pay them to do something else, and they will do it better. Anybody else? So we are at 11:20, so we're way early. But you're all good? Stick a fork in me, I'm done. Please fill out those forms. There will be people in the back of the room who would collect those from you. And then we're going to head downstairs for lunch, which I don't think they're ready for us yet, but okay, thank you. Okay, yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit more about, because the question that was asked in the back was, should ideas or values, core values of an organization come from the top? And I think that you need buy-in at the top, but you can, as a great leader, you empower the leaders around you or those that are part of your organization to listen. Can you elaborate on how creating an environment where you empower those around you to make your organization better, what that looks like?
I can give it to you in a statement. Vision is the art of getting other people to see something that does not yet exist and claim it as their own. That's leadership. I have to take people somewhere they don't know they're going, but they own it. And when they do that, they help to amplify and manifest the culture that we want. I don't think it has to be dictated down. In fact, I resent that. I don't think it should be pushed down. I think the tone should be set. I think you should be very clear about the culture you want, and then you should hire people who can interpret it effectively and reinvent it over and over and over again. But I don't think it's a set of dictates that say, here's what you must do, you must do, you must do. And I'll give you one further example of that. Hickory Farms of Ohio was a client of mine many, many years ago when I first started in the business. And they had two leaders who dictated the culture. As an example, management was never allowed to drink with employees. If you were senior management, you could never be in a bar with an employee, ever. They never allowed management to fly on an airplane with employees. And they went through this process because they were trying to get the message across that we don't fraternize and that they look down on it. Where's Hickory Farms, Ohio today? Because they were so rigid in this culture about they work for us, but we can't be seen with them. And that was really part of the culture. And I tried to predict it, and I said to them, you guys got to change. You got to open up. You got to interact with these people. You can't just dictate. Hickory Farms of Ohio didn't want to hear that. And they don't exist. I mean, you can still get them in a couple of malls. When was the last time you were in a mall? Anything else? Well, I hate ending on a negative. There's a good, yes, hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to ignore your opinion on print media. So, I work for the local paper here. What is the best way to use print media to promote your brand? Are there certain guidelines that you like to stick to promote your brand? Yes. What is the best way to use print media to promote your brand? And are there certain guidelines you'd like to stick to do that?
If I'm using print media, it has to have a powerful call to action. It cannot be about me. It has to be about you, the customer, and what you will derive. It has to have some kind of a time limit on it. You have to take a specific action in a specific time for a specific recognition, reward, whatever you want to call it. And if you're not doing that, then I don't think print works. I mean, we used to run full-page ads for the Chicago Sinfonietta and the Chicago Tribune, and we couldn't sell 5 tickets. Because all it was people thinking, well, do I want to go to the concert here, there, and I said to them, let's stop running ads about us and let's start running ads about them. And when the ads changed, so did the ticket sales. It's not about us, it's always about them. And most print ads are about us. If you look at a lot of print ads, it's here's what we do and here's what we can do for you and we can do it better and we can do it cheaper, but they don't really tell you why you should do business with them. And there's almost no sense of urgency. There has to be a call to action and there has to be some kind of time limit that says, do this by this date so you can benefit this way. That's print to me. It's lost its urgency. Yes?
How important, I know you've talked about values and everything like that. Talk to me a little bit about logos and the consistency of having an image that supports your brand. And then my follow-up question is, where I work right now, we have a dual image. We have, I work for a law firm, so we have our firm name, but then we also are doing business as. How do you incorporate both of those to get the biggest bang for your buck? I mean, we're more known as the law firm instead of the doing business as. We want to push the doing business as, and how do we?
What do they have in common with each other, other than you're doing them? What's the relationship of those two entities?
So the law firm that I work for is strictly tax resolution, and so our image is IRS trouble solvers. Anybody needs an IRS agent? But so our doing business as is IRS trouble solvers. But how do we incorporate? Everybody knows the law firm is Patrick Sheehan and Associates. So how do we pull those in together to make them more integrated?
Well, I would probably give up the Patrick Sheehan identity, and I would focus on what the business really does, because what you told me that business does is the real benefit to me. I have IRS trouble. That's what I care about. I don't care about Patrick Sheehan. So I would immediately change that. I did it with my own. When my customers said brands that stand is what stood out, okay, I didn't want to go through the hassle of a legal change, so I still do business under ins and outs, but my checks have both names on them, and people write me checks to both, and I prefer to use the brands that stand because that's what people are buying. They used to buy ins and outs. They cared about that. And there's a funny story about that. I named the company Ins and Outs because I wanted to get in and get out. I wanted it to be my business model. I wanted to show insights and outcomes. And I knew that there were some people that said ins and outs means the guy's savvy. He knows what he's doing. He knows the ins and outs of things, right? And I thought that was brilliant. That's the company. First phone call comes from a business partner of mine in a totally unrelated business. He calls, the receptionist answers the phone, and he hangs up. And they call back. And she goes, he wants to talk to you. I said, well, of course he does. This is our first day of business. Who else would he talk to? He wants to talk to me. So he gets on, and I said, well, what's going on, Don? Didn't you just call and hang up? He said, yeah, what's the name of your business? I said, Ins and Outs. He goes, why wouldn't you go by Jim Polly and Associates? You're well known. I said, I don't care about my name. I care about my customer. And I said, Ins and Outs is the thing. He goes, I hung up because I thought I called a porn shop. Now, 10 years later, I moved to a different state. And I called Don, and I said, here's your chance, Don. I'm going to change the name of the company. I'm kind of bored with Ins and Outs. I'm going to come up with something else. He said, are you out of your mind? Do you know how much brand equity you have in Ins and Outs now? You got to keep it. I said, well, I'm going to add brands that stand. He goes, that I understand. I think that's a good idea. Use both, but don't give up Ins and Outs because I know a lot of people who know what that means. So he went from thinking it was a porn shop to, okay, now it's a business he admires. And guess what he did? About a month later, I called his office to talk to him about something, and his receptionist, Peggy, who I've known forever, answered the phone. And I said, Peggy, this is Jim. And in the background, I hear him yell, somebody get Ins and Outs on the phone right now, because he was having a brand crisis. And I thought, bingo, we're going to keep Ins and Outs. Anything else? So just by a show of hands, how old is this anecdotal storytelling? Is it a good thing? No, is it a bad thing? Raise your hands. Because I worry that I'm putting you to sleep with all these anecdotal stories. Okay? All right, well, that's the kind of feedback that helps me. Are we done? Is there anything else? Going to see you all at lunch, and you're going to be able to talk about this experience and exchange notes and all the good stuff. Marty, you're up.
Yep, great. Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. Okay, thanks. Thanks again, Jim, for your dynamic presentation. Hopefully now we all have a better idea what it takes to build a legendary brand. I did want to take a moment again to thank today's sponsors, so Pan American Bank and Trust, the City of Elmhurst and Elmhurst College Commission, the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the Elmhurst Economic Development Commission. And also, thank you so much to the individuals who brought along their clothing for our Career Closet initiative, which we started in the back. Thank you so much. That will prove so helpful to our students as they look to start their professional careers. As Jim just mentioned, we have lunch that will be served downstairs in the prospect room. So there's stairs really as you walk out on either side where you can go downstairs, or there's an elevator located over on the west end that you can take down. And so with that, thank you again. Thank you for attending today's event, and we're looking forward to conversing with you over lunch.